Hey there, I'm Lolis Antonia, and today I've got something special. You may know me as someone who's done a Fire Emblem LTC, where you try and complete a game in the minimum number of turns. Low turn count playthroughs are quite popular in the Fire Emblem community as a highly optimized style of play, but today we're talking about a different optimized style of play. We're talking about speedrunning. The core of Fire Emblem gameplay is designed without real time as a consideration, so making time the objective has some really interesting consequences. But still, speedruns are often overlooked or dismissed by some members of the community. Because of this, I thought it would be cool to create a resource to help show people what's cool about Fire Emblem speedruns and provide clear gateways into this corner of the community. So I'm here to interview some of the top speedrunners of many of the games in the series. Thanks for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I am KirbyMastah, and I ran a lot of Fire Emblem games. You've probably seen me on some GDQ shows, and I've also been featured a handful of times on Mekkah's channel as well.
Yeah, my name is Gwimpage. I've also ran some Fire Emblem games at some of the GDQs a number of years ago. Long time just around in the community. And yeah, I used to run FE9 and FE10 pretty consistently back in the day. Now I'm a little washed up, but still around.
Hi, I am Mute. I have run a lot of Fire Emblem games, like, I don't know, 10 or something categories at this point. I don't really keep track. And I guess I'm most known for Thracia, and I kind of made the TRS route with help from Aggro Incarnate. And I've been on a few marathons, like Questing for Glory once, but not many other notable ones.
Awesome. So we'll get right into it. I've got a good number of questions ahead of us. So first off, really simple. How did you guys all first get into speedrunning Fire Emblem? We could start it with Kirby, maybe?
Yeah, so I've been speedrunning. I found speedrunning itself. I'm not going to get into the entire story, but I found speedrunning itself through like Kirby games, spoiler alert, wow. And also like other games like Metroid games and Sonic games since like 2003, 2004. And there's a really ancient website that used to host speedrunning called Speed Demos Archive, where an older runner named Vegan12 did a really neat segmented speedrun of Radiant Dawn, and at the time was really wowed me a lot because not only was it meticulously routed and tried to go for a lot of unlikely stuff that he had to like save scum over to go for the sake of going fast, but like he will also really focus on the execution aspect, which at the time was not really something that RPG speedrunners prioritized. It's just all about showcasing the route, not executing it quickly. And ever since then, I became interested in learning Radiant Dawn, and then things just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could add to that, like his normal mode segmented run, like he showed me a video of the like 4 endgame, like with the Asher fight. Like his execution in that like section was like out of this world, like crazy how fast, like you could clearly tell there was a lot of effort put into it. And I remember seeing it and being like, wow, I want to go fast like that.
Is I both done then, I guess?
I was just sort of adding to that, but I guess I could go. So like my current friend group at the time were like all doing speedruns, and like because it was sort of like the cool thing to do at the time, I remember. And they were doing like Mario Sunshine or like Banjo-Kazooie. And I was like just sort of like kind of just doing my own thing. Like I was just joining random races on Speedruns Live. If anybody remembers that site.
Yeah, I remember that.
So we're just like joining random races like Mario Kart and whatever, but I remember I actually met Viking and somebody else named Chronoblade. They were racing Radiant Dawn just sort of like out of nowhere. Like it was sort of just like a massive chance of luck that they were releasing Fire Emblem, and I was like, oh hey, and I like Fire Emblem. Maybe like I'll watch, and then like they invited me to join in on them. And I'm like, oh hey, that sounds like let's do it. So that's how I got roped into speedrunning Radiant Dawn, just like a random stroke of luck, and like I've loved it ever since. Really,
That's awesome.
Okay, so I have a much different starting point from them, obviously, because I did not start speedrunning until about 2 years ago, which is the end of 2020 or something like that. Wait, yeah, that's 2 years ago. So essentially, I was like involved with some other group, like the Shin Megami Tensei community, where some of my friends did SMT1 speedruns and stuff, or Shin Megami Tensei 1, and like Persona 4 and whatever and other things, and like I kind of like was becoming more interested in stuff like that, and then I was like thinking of maybe running a game, and I at the time Ghostwheel had made notes for the FE4 run, and I had seen the run. I was like, oh, it literally just tells you what to do. So I was like, one of my friends told me I should try it, and I just like did. It was very difficult to actually finish a run because I was not very good, and also because finishing a run is kind of difficult for that game. But I eventually did, and then kind of just went from there. I started like a bunch of other games after that, which is kind of sad because now I think FE4 has like the worst speedrun in the series. But
4 hours, I think, right?
yeah. Well, not entirely because of that, just like it's like the worst combination ever of being boring and also stressful at the same time, because like there's so much not like waiting, and then also like if you make one mistake the entire run ends, so it's like,
Yeah.
oh my god. Yeah, that's about how I started pretty much, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was like looking back at my SRL race history, and like I bumped into them like at the end of 2013, so that's gonna be 10 years ago later this year.
Don't say that.
I know, right? And that's when we met, like a few months after that.
Wow. All right, so moving on. So what do you guys enjoy the most about speedrunning Fire Emblem? And do you have a favorite game or era of games like GBA or Super Nintendo to run? Again, we could start it with KirbyMastah. Sorry.
Okay.
I think what really stands out to me with Fire Emblem speedrunning as a whole is the execution aspect, honestly. Because like in most games, 3 houses besides 3 houses, the most games the menuing is very intuitive and fast and responsive, and also like just the actual chapters themselves, you can kind of visibly see how fast you're moving your characters, and you have to plan out how to swap between the characters, and there's a lot more of a technical execution aspect to it, to a lot of the games, than just LOL go menu fast. I mean, a lot of it is menu fast, but still, like, for example, in GBA Fire Emblems, you need to get into really awkward habit of holding B, the cancel button, before selecting any units, because B is also the move fast button. And like, I think that which makes sense to me, because like that's kind of how I got into Fire Emblem speedrunning as a whole in the first place. Vekins run and execution on that, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to learn to go fast like that too. And that's just really impressive to me. Both like the fast menuing on the actual maps and the fast like base movement and the menuing on like inventory management and stuff like that too. So like, I don't think there's like, out of all the games I ran, I don't think there's like a single game that doesn't feel really fun to execute. Even 3 houses, which has a ridiculous amount of input delay, it's still fun. But yeah, I think that's like, I mean, like the routing aspect's always fun to do, like mathing stuff out, increasing your chances of success on some stuff, weighing the risks and reward on the non-manipulated runs, and so on. So like, it's honestly just a really fun kind of series to speedrun, both in terms of a routing aspect and the execution aspect to me.
Okay, my favorite part about it when Radiant Dawn speedrunning was like really popular my favorite part about it was definitely the collaborative effort that we constantly were finding ways of improving the route, finding different strats, oh hey, there's this new tech or this cursor trick that we were able to find out how to consistently do, and then all of a sudden somebody would do a run and then the record would all of a sudden just be 2 minutes faster or something.
Thanks, Don Don, for finding fast enemies.
There was that one, and fast X switching. That one was also almost a minute once we found out how to do it consistently. Because remember at the time it was wow, this just randomly happens. What's the cause of this? And then we were able to slowly work together and find out ways of doing these silly little cursor
three
tricks.
different X switching techniques you can do in Radiant Dawn, and a little bit less in Path of Radiance, but still, and all that time adds up.
So my favorite part about it, or I guess speedrunning Radiant Dawn, was just that community effort, and also chat is funny. Streaming and the community was definitely my favorite part about speedrunning it for sure. I'd probably say the FE9 and FE10 games were my favorite to speedrun. Just the menuing in those games feels so crisp. I like having to route around consistency and not having to worry about RNG minute. I know some of the other games, the GBA games, are crazy heavy into it. And
Yeah.
that's fine. I've actually tried to do FE7 in the past, but I don't know, FE9 and FE10 are definitely my go-to games.
Awesome. Mute, do you have any words?
So I think every speedrunning genre has something that's unique to it in terms of how you speedrun it. So I think for SRPGs, the thing is with the way SRPGs are designed, the ceiling in terms of how fast you can go is only limited by how fast you can make inputs, as compared to most other genres where you're more limited by, well, obviously you're limited by the animation speed and stuff. But I feel compared to most other genres, you are less limited by that, because the game is controlled largely by how fast you decide to do things, pretty much, because the game's lets you wait whenever you want to, essentially. And also, forgot. The other thing I think was interesting is there's a lot of things you have to keep track of at once, which could be a bad thing for some people, I guess, because it's really hard to remember sometimes. But that is one of the things that is possibly impressive about it, I guess. And I would say my favorite era is probably around the SNES era. I'm not really a huge fan of FE3, but it's okay as a run, and I really like Berwick Saga, even though that's not really a game that's that popular.
Fire Emblem, not Fire Emblem.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because Berwick Saga is a very impressive run if you can actually finish it. I'm not even exaggerating at all. It's insanely difficult. But
Oh, really?
in terms of Fire Emblem, I guess it would be Thracia then. My favorite.
I still need to learn Dacia someday.
Someday, TM.
Yeah, that's what I like about Fire Emblem speedrunning, is there's just so much to it. And a lot of it comes with practice as well. It's just, you just sort of, if there's a way for you to sort of salvage a botched attempt, and then being able to fix it just comes with knowledge and experience with playing the game.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes it's not possible though, right? GBA games, if you mess something up, your run's just cooked.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's just every game really just offers something different, even if they're kind of similar. All the GBA Fire Emblems, for example, yeah, it's easy to just put them all in one blanket and go oh, they're all RNG manipulated. They're all GBA Fire Emblems. They're all pretty similar runs, and on a very high level, they kind of are. But they're also just really different kinds of runs. Blazing Sword FE7 is by far the most glitchy out of them, because it just has so much enemy control glitching going on. on top of like warp and rescue spam because you get pent. And like, whereas like FE6 is pretty much no glitches or tricks at all. But it has the most intense like manipulation going on because you have to go through all these unlikely odds because it's FE6. And then FE8 is kind of like the most vanilla like speedrun because you don't get rescue, you don't get warp, you just have core movement and planning without that basically.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're all easy to put under a blanket, but they're all also very different runs.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, moving on, I know that Kirby and Mute both have experience with routing runs. And Gwimpage, you mentioned that you have experience at least with optimizing runs. I don't know how much further that goes.
I actually mostly did the FE9 route.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had that planning with Don Don, I think.
Don Don actually only helped with like 1 or 2 chapters. It was mostly me.
Gonna put him on blast.
No, it was fun. Like I remember he was just hanging out in stream chat while I was like banging my head on the Ina chapter in FE9. Just banging my head in the throne room trying to like find a good way to drop Ike so he could make it to the throne after like recruiting Tironio. And then he suggested like recruiting Tironio in such a way where after you recruit him, he could rescue and then Marcia could take him and drop in a way where he could seize next turn. And he helped with that.
That was definitely LTC brain.
Yeah, it's just so goofy. Like you recruit him just to rescue Ike and it's just like, what?
I think also just tell him 2 times, but that's probably slower.
Oh, like you literally only have Marcia, Ike, and Tironio in the throne room. Like everybody else is undeployed and hiding.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question about routing runs. What are some of the strategies that you use and challenges that you face when routing a speedrun? This could be how you make decisions on short or long-term compromises, or how you make grand-scale decisions like character and class combinations for a carry unit, that type of thing. Sorry, we'll start with Gwimpage this time.
So I would definitely say consistency is 100% one of the things that like we'd have to plan for, at least in context of FE9 and FE10, because you definitely don't want to have to be like resetting over missing like a 60% hit rate. And if you do take a risk, it's calculated. It's something that you kind of don't take lightly, I guess. Like, for example, like, even to this day, I don't really want to buy a pure water for the chapter 4/4 Sleep Bishop. Like, that guy kills so many runs. Like, it's not even funny how many like runs he's killed over the years. But for me, I personally don't buy a pure water there. I know it's like a 30-something% chance of landing, and if it lands, like your run's over. But like I decided to take the risk and not bother with pure water, even though it kind of nullifies that chance. So I definitely think consistency when you're planning routes is like super important and something you would keep in mind. Like in FE9, we actually run on fixed mode. And this is definitely slower than, say, if you were to run on random mode and just get like really lucky with level ups. Because fixed mode, you're kind of capped on how many stats you can sort of gain in a stat. So we sort of choose consistency over just like randomly getting those stats, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a boss in the Path to Radiant speedrun where you can save a chunk of time by just meteoring the boss 3 times, but that requires landing Khalil. You pretty much need to win like 3 bad coin flips in a row.
Yeah, it's bad. Khalil has like horrible. A 70-ish hit, but Tormod is like less than 50.
It's less than 50, and Biorhythm makes it vary. So have fun. But no, there's a much more consistent strat where the only thing that can go wrong is like Tanith could die. She gets hit every time, but
yeah, and it's
really
kind of
rare.
fun, like looking at it theoretically. Like, what if we were to run on random mode? Like, I guess it would be faster. Like, if you were just to reset, like, however many times, and then just get an ideal run. But at the time, I was routing for HDQ consistency, so that's why we chose to do fixed mode. And I guess it still is on fixed mode. Say, huh? But if we were ever to revisit, I think that could be an improvement, I guess. It's taking more risks, go fast.
In terms of routing, I think sometimes with SRPGs is like some of the ways that are actually faster than other ways is a bit counterintuitive. Like you actually have to time things sometimes to be sure. Actually, you probably have to do that in like every genre of speedrunning, but like probably more in SRPGs sometimes, especially with like longer animations. Like for example, when I was trying to improve the TRS, I was like trying to make it so it was under 4 hours. I was like trying to save as much time as possible, like doing as much weird stuff with the menus and stuff. And like, so like in Tearing Saga, there's this tome called Ararain, which attacks every enemy on the map. And like you would think, wow, that doesn't sound very fast because it attacks every enemy on the map. So like there's this one map, it's like the desert map where the strategy was to like just walk across it and then like end the map and not fight anything. It turns out that using Ararain to just kill every enemy and then just walk to the end was faster because like every time you're ending your turn, when there's enemies alive, it like has a bit of extra time it takes for the enemy turn to end for every enemy that's alive. So if nobody's alive, it like ends really fast. So it was like over a minute faster, I think. And aggro was like really surprised by that for like the longest time. It's like, wow, how is this faster? But I timed it. It definitely is. So it's faster.
Yeah, that's definitely what I find really interesting. Things like things that seem very unintuitive, where you have to sort of measure the net time gains and losses to kind of figure out how to, splice together like a really quick route. Gabi, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I wanted to add something to that.
Oh, sure.
Like timing and testing is just so tedious, but it's also part of the work and effort that you put towards it. Like I know Kirby's definitely done way more testing and timing than I have in the past. One of the big like timings I remember doing was in 3P. Like if you remember that map, Kirby, like I think we used to consistently go for like 7 or 8 turns. Like it was slow. And then I remember timing it. I was like, wow, if we can shave off a turn, this is literally like 40 seconds. So
One of my favorite timings for Radiant Dawn speedruns was Blossom, where I think I did all the timing for this, where you would make like a 20-second detour to grab the Blossom scroll with Titania in the Burning Supplies chapter. I think it's 3-3. And you give it to Tanith, who's a flying carry in part 4, to make her gain less levels. And it turns out that you ultimately save 5 seconds because you cut out like 5 or 6 extra levels from her.
Nice.
I was just like, this timing and testing stuff is just so tedious. Like it's beyond me. Like I'll share any ideas that I have that might be able to like go faster, but like that stuff, it'd be so hard for me to keep attention.
Ironically, in the normal mode speedrun range, then we give Tanith Paragon double experience. So it's really funny how that works out.
All right. Unless we have any other thoughts, we could move on to the next question.
All right.
Sure.
Awesome. So Fire Emblem speedruns can involve some very difficult execution. RNG manipulation in some games requires inputs to be timed on specific frame windows, and in games like the GBA or DS games, for example, your menu and movement speed is limited only really by your fingers. With this in consideration, how do you generally learn and practice a route? Sorry, we could start with Mute this time.
Whenever I learn a route, it kind of depends on the game. Like, usually I kind of just go through the entire run at least a few times, then I just start actually timing after I feel confident in it, I guess. and that's kind of mostly it. Sometimes I practice like problem areas, like especially in Radiant Dawn, because like a lot of the time you won't like see most of the run just because of like the early game being kind of annoying sometimes. So like I practice like the last half of the game a bunch of times because I like don't get there like nearly as much as I do like the first part of it or whatever. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all I do. So I don't think I don't do the incredibly complicated practice or anything, I guess.
Oh my god, the amount of times like I've done the first 50 minutes of the Radiant Dawn run. Like, anytime I come back after like however long of not playing the game, like I can literally do it because I know it like the back and like how often like I'd have to play through it. Because a lot of runs just don't get past the first hour if like you're going for attempts. There's just too much shenanigans, I guess, with 3P or just part 1 luck.
Edward.
Yeah.
Would any of you ever practice, say, individual chapters?
Ooh, all the time. It's funny, like my practice saves are always just a giant mess of different like typical chapters. I usually try to save a slot just for attempts, but like literally as many save slots as I can are just dedicated for like tricky menuing chapters.
Oh, of course, he has so many saves in Radiant Dawn.
Four.
You only have 6. You only have 6 though. It's just like
really?
I wanted. Yeah. I only want I want to practice like 1 or.
Oh,
I'm thinking of 3 houses where you have like 50, aren't I?
Yeah.
3 houses gave you 3 first, I think. It was only 3 in 3 houses, and then there was an update that bumped you up to like 20 or 25.
Yeah.
The thing with Radiant Dawn is like there's like 40 something chapters, and like just want to practice like more than half of them.
And then you have some runs that are like 30 minutes.
I was gonna say the one I practiced the most was probably like chapter 18 of Thracia, because like it doesn't really sound that impressive compared to like some of the Radiant Dawn menus that like take forever because like there's like a million things you can do in the menus in that game. But like in all recruitment, Thracia chapter 18, you have to do like over a minute total of like just like doing a bunch of item trades, and it's like really confusing. It's like probably one of the most hard to remember things I've done, but I guess it doesn't really sound as cool because it's like a longer menu in Radiant Dawn in 3 Endgame, but whatever.
Well, to be fair, like 70% of it is forges.
Yeah, like the inventory management like sections are always like really hard, and like I feel like are more impressive than they actually look. Because this is kind of unrelated, I suppose, but I remember watching like CFG like however many years ago, and he always said that like the inventory management is always like the hardest part of like the run. Because I know in like Zelda games, like you just have to be in and out of the menu, like whenever you're equipping stuff, and like definitely one of the easiest places to like lose time on a run is just dawdling in the menus. So I always find inventory like stuff like impressive.
Yeah, they tend to be harder in most, like the base menus or preps menus tend to be the hardest in most Fire Emblem games because like they're usually they can be quick, but in the longer ones, like Thracia chapter 18 or Radiant Dawn chapter 3, for example, you just usually don't have downtime to think about what's coming up. It's just you just have to know everything on the fly, like not on the fly, but immediately, and just execute it like 1 or 2 minutes straight, as opposed to like on a map where like, oh, I'm in the middle of moving this character 10 tiles. I can take this 2 seconds to think about what I need to do next, or I have this entire enemy phase to think about the benchmarks I need. You just don't have that downtime whenever you're doing preps or inventory management. So like, it's the time you spend thinking is time loss. And that's something that I've told other people that don't even speedrun RPG games. Like, and like I know, for example, I was talking to some Sonic Adventure 2 battle speedrunners that run 180 emblem runs, and there's a lot of menuing in that game because you need to do all the missions for every character. And like, I quoted this saying like, if you ever have to read a menu, you're losing time, and that is very true.
All right. Yeah, well, if we're all comfortable moving on. Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe that a lot of media can often be more enjoyable with a slight look behind the curtain. Likewise, I think this applies to highly optimized categories like a speedrun. It's easy to just see like a single carry unit stomp the entire game without recognizing all the work that really went into planning a run, like minimizing combat to save time, for example. If you could speak to somebody who's new to Fire Emblem speedruns, what would you advise that they look out for watching a run to make for some more attentive and interesting viewing?
That's a hard question, not gonna lie.
It is. I was actually thinking about it. I was like,
Like, it's easy to just go look at a video and watch it, and like, sure, that's a good starting point, but like at the same time, you also don't see like, for example, you don't see like all the things that can go wrong because you're watching at a world record. Almost nothing should go wrong, technically. Like, or you don't. There's like a lot of benchmarks you aren't aware of when you watch a video. For example, in Three Houses, Chapter 8, Byleth needs to hit 24 strength. For Chapter 8, in 2 routes. Otherwise, you need to go out of your way to buy an armor slayer and waste like 10 seconds. That's not the kind of thing you'd see in a video, in a world record video, because if you have to do that, the record's probably dead. So like, it's a combination of like both studying some videos and also like having resources provided for new runners to like explain those kinds of flow charts or benchmarks and such.
I think it's probably best watching a commentated run if you can.
Yeah, I would definitely appreciate that.
There's so many things like to Fire Emblem speedrunning. There's like XP management, inventory management. Like there's a lot of cursor tricks under the hood that you might not be aware of just by watching it. So I think definitely watching a commentated run, if possible, is the way to go if you're interested in learning more about the run.
Another potential angle could be things that are particularly difficult that you might not expect that could be appreciated. So, for example, before this, I wouldn't have really considered, I wouldn't have thought much about quite how difficult it is to, do inventory management for like a solid minute while not being able to stop and think, having to do that entire thing at speedrun pace and keep track of where everything is. Things like that may go unappreciated.
Yeah, like I actually got a comment once on my FE12 speedruns just saying like they were super impressed with how fast the run was, and then they saw like there was this one menu where I had to sit there and wait like 3 seconds because I was just looking at all of my benchmarks from Martha and Chris, and that comment was saying I knew it was only like 2 or 3 seconds, but I could tell that like that was just a lot of time loss you were taking because the rest of the run was so fast and that you were spending that time thinking, and they appreciate like, or rather respect how much work has to go into that kind of thing in the preps.
Brings attention to all the places where you don't stop and think. Like if I were to go and try, then I would be stopping and thinking a whole lot more. Like that would be not 3 seconds, but 10 seconds, and it would be all over the run.
It's so hard, but it also just comes with practice. It's just like there's just so many things that you have to keep in mind whenever you're doing like a long 2+ hour run, where it's just like, oh yeah, this character has that rescue staff that's been holding Tana's been holding that rescue staff for the last like 40 minutes and time to pull it out, or however long she has it.
All right, if we're comfortable moving on.
Wait.
Oh yeah,
I
sure.
wanted to say something about this. One thing I think about a lot when people probably wouldn't notice, like there's specific things, and like this is only applicable to like Fire Emblem 5 through 8, where if you're holding A, characters move faster when you move them, and like if you're holding A, you have to hold A while you're like dropping units, like rescue dropping them and stuff to like make it go as fast as possible. There's other actions that also like that, I forgot. Also, you have to hold A like the entire enemy phase, pretty much. Well, that's not hard, it's just like kind of annoying that you have to do that. But that's like a thing I had to get used to at the beginning, because you don't have to do that in some other games, and it's kind of difficult, I guess.
Button mashing in the Radiance games are so annoying. Like, you literally can't stop. Like, you can't take your fingers off the controller. At least for Radiant Dawn, right? Where you constantly have to be mashing.
You have to be holding A the entire time and then pressing some combination of start or B or X. Because like the X button for whatever reason cuts the player phase enemy phase dialogue. I mean icon earlier for whatever reason. Don't ask why.
Like there's a lot of cursor tricks just under the hood as well that definitely go like unnoticed if you're not familiar, because like there's fast enemy phase, there's fast X switching, like there's just fast cursor in general. It's just
one of the funny things I think is like deployment screen optimization in FE5, because it has like a unique deployment menu basically compared to other games. So like in FE5, whenever you go to the deployment screen, there's nobody selected yet. But if you press R, it auto selects up to the max amount of characters you can take for that chapter. So essentially in speedruns, what you do is you like sometimes you'll just like press R and then like remove or add some, and sometimes you'll like not press R at all, just select all of them. You basically have to like time what's faster, like press R and remove enemies or select all of them individually. And I had to like time that a few times. Also, there's some funny like inventory like over the entire game management. Like in any percent of FE5, you like in chapter 3, you like trade the lockpick to Finn for the life ring or something to Leafus, and then Finn has the life ring. He gives it to Safi at the start of chapter 7 from that, and then later on in chapter 14, Dean takes the lockpick from Finn and then gives it to Laura, who uses it to open a door in chapter 20. So like a trade chain going like for an hour and a half of the game, basically.
All right. Well, Gwimpage and KirbyMastah, I understand you both have experience doing draft races with Mekkah on his channel. And this next question is going to be about your perspectives on draft racing. What are your perspectives on draft racing as both a casual format that you can do with friends and as a competitive format or a gateway into solo speedrunning? Of course, for anybody who doesn't know, a draft format is a format for around 4 players who each take turn drafting units to their team. Generally, no unit can be drafted twice, and players will go through the entire cast until each player has a full team of around 10 plus units. They will then play through the game using only those units in what can be a casual playthrough, an LTC, or in this case, a speedrun race.
So I think for like the casual format, like I think it's a lot of fun and it's a different like way of enjoying the game with like friends and people that you might have met online. Like they're fun. Like drafting a team and then like just the random like goofy stuff that happen especially when it's chaotic and like people don't really know like what's like the planning and like I don't know, it's just like chaotic and fun and just like an interesting way of enjoying the game. For more competitive, for me, I think it is another way of enjoying the game. Kind of crazy to me, I guess. Like draft racing ended up getting like optimized to the point where like it's not that much slower than like any percent speedruns. Like they're really optimized with like different carries and like routes like entirely planned out.
Yeah, on that note, Don had a very good video on FE6 draft racing. 2 videos actually. One on the thought process of drafting, and the other on the actual draft race of him and his 3 friends, if I remember right.
Pon, and there was one more, I don't remember their name.
Yeah.
John.
Ton, Lon.
I should also add, I was actually in a draft race with Mekkah April of last year, and that was like the last FE7 draft race. It's funny because like it was delayed for like 5 months or something. We're like, all right, when's the? It's like a common running joke is like, oh, there's never a draft race because we always delay it for like 3 months or something.
Yeah.
while I enjoyed that to an extent, I do get that can be sort of similar to speedruns. It's not really, it's like similar in some ways, but also in other ways not. Like the individual strategies I think are pretty simple compared to any percent speedruns, but it's kind of made more difficult sometimes by the fact that you have to like know many different like strategies to be able to do well at all in a draft. That's kind of one of the criticisms I have of the format, is that I feel like there maybe could be a bit more openness about the strategies, and I found that very annoying and tedious trying to like ask everyone for like different strategies and everything all the time. You just like tell them openly, but I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I don't think anyone intentionally hides stuff, but there is like a community behind like competitive draft racing nowadays, but there also isn't really like a core hub or like internal like publicly available notes, I think is what Mute's talking about.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So,
Yeah.
like I guess like it makes sense that it can be hard to like look around and be like, hey, there's a strat with this carry on this game that I'm trying to look for. Does anyone have documentation on that kind of thing? Because like we actually have a draft racing channels in the speedrun Discord, but like people don't really use it. I think people often use Original Raisins Discord for the draft racing discourse, which I mean that's fine to be clear, but like the point being is like not discourse, talking about and discussing strategies for draft races has been kind of all over the place in my experience.
Yeah. I miss a good forum sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose draft racing also varies really drastically depending on exactly which level you're running at. Because if you looked at some of the earlier draft races that Mekkah would do on his channel, it was, it was much less optimized, and it would take like hours, and it was just, lots of fun. But then, which I'm sure is what it would be for a lot of people if they tried to do a casual draft race. And there's also the other end of the spectrum where it's more like just learning 4 different any percent routes for different carries and like knowing which units can save you which little bits of time in which different areas when you're drafting.
Yeah, personally, I have a lot more fun when it's a lot more unorganized and like people are just like throwing stuff at the wall, like do their like best to have fun, like there's minimal planning, like that stuff's a lot of fun for me. Going on to the other end of the spectrum, like I definitely respect like the effort and like time that went to planning, like beating the game with Lowen and like Keith or whoever. But like, it's also not as fun, so I definitely don't care as much. I don't want to get
Yeah, I so appreciate about both.
Less interesting.
It's just not for you, I think. Is
Yeah,
what you're saying.
Less interesting for me personally, because at that point, I could like learn the any percent speedrun, like
Yeah.
I think there is somewhat of an issue with like how the games are designed in terms of that too, because like sometimes like one character will be way better than everyone else, and I think like sometimes like it's so optimized in like some of the GBA games that it just like becomes pick one character, like do the entire game with them, and also like you do a lot of the game with like Hector too. I think some games are just kind of more interesting for like optimization for that in general, because you aren't going to be as easily able to make so much out of one character. In some other games, such as Three Houses, you have to like use a lot more characters in that, to my knowledge at least. But that's an incredibly complicated thing to get into, I guess.
Yeah, like for the draft races to be like a lot more interesting, there often has to be a lot of arbitrary rules around it, which, to be clear, there's nothing really wrong with that. After all, it's kind of boring to see people draft race where the person who drafts Marcus in FA7 wins automatically. Whereas like the standard speedrunning, on the other hand, is very different in that it's pretty much anything goes. You use whatever tools you want to just go as fast as possible. And like I know, like for example, like one example is Three Houses, which where they pretty much have to in Three Houses anyone can reclass into anything basically, meaning like if you pick any character, you can make them your flyer carry. So they had to make these rules like, oh, these characters can only be trained in their boons to make them just more distinguishable from each other. They also had to like ban certain really overpowered tools like Answer the Goddess maybe, or Retribution, and also like ban skipping enemy phases as well, for the draft race setting to be more interesting. Whether that's good or not is up for debate, of course, but like the point being, like, there's draft races usually require like a lot of rule sets that kind of shape draft races to be as even as possible,
And change
which is cool. But yeah, they do change over time too. So like right now, I think, okay, well, don't quote me on this, but nowadays I think the problem with Three Houses drafting is that Petra's too broken, to my understanding. It's like, oh, whoever picks Petra just wins the race, basically. But yeah, there's always, like, some games are just better built for this kind of format than others as well. So
I think that's just sort of like the problem, I guess, inherently with competitive level draft racing, is just there's just some games where, like, if you pick a character, you have like such like an advantage over the rest of the people racing that not quite as fair, I suppose. Like, the last time I talked with Mekkah about draft racing, he said, "Oh yeah, people don't really play FE8 because anytime like the people that get Vanessa are just like miles like faster than like what other racers would have to deal with, which I guess would be like Franz and like Tana, Cormac, which are just significantly slower than Vanessa Carrier."
yeah, remember Gwimpage when Gwimpage literally grinded Tana and I think Loot in the tower and then won the draft race for the Casual Sacred Stones one?
I think I remember watching that one, yeah. Okay, well, we're happy to move on. Yeah. So, certain Fire Emblem speedruns have a really interesting relationship of TAS and RTA. Taking a GBA run without TAS-only sequences, like unit stacking as an example, a TAS and RTA run will use the exact same strategies and the exact same inputs, only a TAS can do so much quicker. This doesn't apply to all runs, but considering this extreme, what are your thoughts on the TAS-RTA relationship? One perspective could be that a speedrun is just a presentation of a route, and the TAS makes the RTA redundant. Another could be that the execution, having to perform under increasing pressure, is more interesting. And that's a perspective which it seems like all of you have agreed with already.
Yeah, I think to my understanding, well, the FE4, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the FE4 speedrun is exactly the same thing as the TAS because you aren't like as bottlenecked by human inputs. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, the game does not change at all, other than when you make an action in terms of RNG, so you can just do the same thing as the task and you get the same result. It's very FE4 moment, I guess. I don't know.
FE4 moment is a way to describe it, yeah. Whereas like the GBA Fire Emblems, because it's there's such a responsive game and cursor wiggling burns random numbers, the task has the task has much more flexibility with trying to go for a certain outcome. So like the task can burn 500 sets of RNs in less than 1 second. Whereas when you're routing a speedrun, despite the fact that it's manipulated, you have to balance the pros and cons, because yeah, sure, you can theoretically try to rig a double 1%, but at what cost? Like that could take you like 2 minutes of RN burning, and that's just not something you can realistically do. One cool example that I like bringing up because it's really cool is in FE6 all chapters, Roy has to cap skill before promotion. When he promotes, he's at 23 skill, and he has to land a double crit on Zephiel, which is a double 6%. The closest random number seed is 800 random numbers away for that. I literally grind him to 24 skill to have a double 7% crit, because the next RN that lets me do that is 100 away, and that's over a minute faster by humans.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, so like that's one really interesting extreme example of how like the human execution really makes a big difference in the routing there, because like a task can pretty easily just find a double 6% crit in less than a second, but you just cannot do that as a human. You have to make compromises. So like trying to rate skill and luck growths is also a factor. Like I try to go out of my way to make sure that like my carries, especially Cormac, get like skill and luck, because hitting is important, and it's just much easier to find seeds where you have better hit than don't.
Well, would anybody else have any thoughts on this kind of idea?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Me too.
sorry.
Oh, you can go first though.
Okay. What I was going to say is I'm sure we all know probably the most prominent TASer in Fire Emblem is Laponye, or I'm not sure how to pronounce their name. Laponye? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
They have actually had a lot of useful contributions to some speedruns. Like, in particular, they did their Tearing Saga task, which, as far as I know, that's the only reason we know how the RNG works in the game. Essentially, the RNG works in Tearing Saga sort of similar to kind of similarly to like 2RN, where like the higher numbers will have higher hit than it actually says, and lower numbers will have lower hit than it actually says. So like, but it's like different. It's kind of just like each number.
That's not a straight line, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
It's
what?
like a weird sort of jagged graph, not a straight line.
Yeah, it doesn't go to decimal points like 2RN. So like each number has how many RNs that can relate to it. Like numbers 1 through 7 only have one roll that can correspond to them in the roll, meaning that if you have a displayed 1 through 7 hit or crit rate, it only has a 1% chance out of all of those. So it's pretty helpful there. And also, like, I think Laponye also made SSS rank task for FE5, which I think had me thinking a lot of things about how the RNG works and why certain things are possible in that run but aren't possible in like an actual like human done speedrun, because like this is like really confusing to explain probably, but like because of how the RNG works in FE5, essentially whenever you start a chapter, there's 1 out of 64 seeds you can get depending on the frame that you started it on, and the only way you can know which seed you're on is if you like do things to find out what RNs are there, if you know like the RNs that are there first, which is essentially you're never going to do this in a actual human speedrun unless like it's really helpful, which you actually do this sometimes. Which is, but also in the RNG in that game, the thing is that there are shared numbers across every seed in the game at certain points, which allows you to guaranteed proc certain things such as staff hits or misses or certain vigor stars at some points, which is funny because like the C, I think there's like a RN that can proc both FE or a 3 vigor star or a 5 vigor star within the same one, because it rolls like a 14 or something, so that's really useful there. So because of how that works, you can do those things within a human-made one, but I determined that like doing a similar to a task run for that game would be basically humanly impossible. It is feasibly possible, but like because of how it works, you couldn't really do that. You would have to like frame perfect, hit the same frame every time you start every chapter that you want or whatever, and do that the entire game, and then like do every action perfectly with no mistakes. Yeah, it technically is possible, but I just don't think you could ever do that, probably.
Yeah, going off of that, like at least in the context of FE9 and FE10, like the tasks, any of the tasks that have been done for those games, like just kind of aren't possible to do on console in an RTA setting. Like, there's been a few FE9 tasks where like you can actually manipulate the RNG and like get favorable level ups, like really low percent crits and just your standard task stuff. Like, but you can't actually, at least to my knowledge, you can't actually like RNG manip FE9.
I think it's. I don't know if people. I haven't looked into it too much. I believe
at least
it's
a consistent
not
way of
not
at least consistently like loading up the game and then like getting the same level ups. I remember, if you remember Ruidath, like I remember them messaging me and they were asking, "Hey, did you want to try load up the seed for FE10 using this time?" And then they told me like what level up I should expect Mekkah to get. And I just never got the same result as what they said that the seed should give me. And I sort of just like stopped trying after a while because it just never worked. And it's just like, well, it would be great if this could work because, you know, RNG manipulation for those games would like save a crazy amount of time. Like you could kind of like reroute the entire like thing to be more risky and like just faster in general.
Not
But,
a
like-
3-hour speedrun.
Yes, but it's like it's just something not attainable, at least to my knowledge at the moment. So I guess it would be like the forbidden fruit, being able to RNG manipulate those games. But at the moment, TAS, like the TASs of FE9 and FE10, just like aren't really useful resources, I guess, for RTA.
Kind of an interesting example also is Shadow Dragon and FE12. Shadow Dragon is entirely manipulatable, although it's based off of your clock, and it is replicable. TR143 actually did a run where, because like the armory burns random numbers every frame, so you kind of give up on maintaining manipulation after that, after you forge your rapier. Yeah, I know. Speedrun forges a rapier instead of a wing spear. Don't at me. But yeah, but then I think TR's run saves and quits, and then loads up a save at a different time to get back onto a consistent seed, and it just rigs everything onward after that forge. FE12, which you would think is the same system, same engine. I talked to Rudath about FE12 again, and like there's just like 5 different things that affect the RNG right when you load the game that it's pretty much impossible to manipulate humanly. Which is really weird and interesting at the same time, because you'd expect those 2 games to work the same way, but they really don't.
Doesn't DS have the strange RN system where I feel I remember hearing that something to do with battle saves, like you can rig with a battle save, but you have to advance. Like if you fight a boss, you advance RNG by waiting on like the dialogue screen, and then it advances when they blink or something.
Yeah, I know. I believe, at least in FE11, I believe like every character that shows burns RNs. Every frame that you see a map crit animation burns random numbers as well. So like the TAS has to rig crits in order to give themselves more options for RNG manipulating, because you can't like cursor wiggle to RNG manipulate in the DS game. So like you just need those options to burn RNs like that. And yeah, I think characters blinking is another factor in that.
It's
too,
so funny watching people do FE11 runs, because they're just constantly trying to like avoid burning RNs as much as possible, and then they're just sitting there just like, oh god, did I burn an RN? It's like, oh, did I skip that cutscene as fast as I could have?
Okay, well, moving on to our final 2 questions, if we're done. These are questions about, more specifically, how people can get more involved with speedrunning. So first off, how would you advise that fans get involved as spectators? So this would be, for example, where to watch live runs or VODs. And of course, you've mentioned before that you would maybe more advise watching commentated runs, as to, get more enjoyment and learn more about what goes into the run. So of course, a good place would be, for example, AGDQ. AGDQ has hosted many Fire Emblem runs.
I'd recommend checking out the Fire Emblem Discord, or like the speedrunning Discord. It should be public, and whenever people are speedrunning, like they generally like post that they're going live. Admittedly, it's a little hard, I guess, to watch like active Fire Emblem speedrunnings all the time, but whenever it is around, like, I believe that's the place where you want to check.
Yeah, well,
Would you be able to add anything, Kirby? Because like I'm out of the loop with the community for speedrunning.
Yeah, Fire Emblem speedrunning is kind of in a weird spot, because like, maybe this is me slightly venting a bit, but it's the kind of thing a lot of people in the online fan base talk about all the time. But the reality is, like, there aren't many runners for it in the first place. It's not a super active community, so like there usually isn't really much activity in the Discord in the first place. But like that doesn't mean that like we aren't around, that we aren't checking notifications. Sometimes you'll see people sharing strats every now and then too. And like it's a very small community. It's not a popular series to speedrun in general, even though it is a popular series in general, which is interesting, but also understandable. Like the Tellius games are like impossible to find nowadays, for example. Good luck speedrunning 3DS games because of 3DS capture. The GBA Fire Emblems are manipulated, so people don't want to learn those. Good luck finding the SNES games and so on. So like they're kind of hard to get into unfortunately, in that sense. So like, we're actually kind of talking about trying to allow emulators or fates because of that accessibility issue.
Yeah.
But like, there's always a balancing factor of like, is this accurate enough to be compared to console runs and so on. But I'm kind of diverging a bit now. But that being said,
yeah, like I have an old 3DS capture card, which is just way slower than any like new 3DS capture.
Yeah, it just sucks. Like
the time difference of just loading up the game is like actually so bad.
But yeah, we do have a Discord though, and like sometimes there'll be silent duds where you're not going to see much activity. But like, trust me, we are watching, and we will respond to people asking questions or anyone who's new and interested in like looking for resources. And yeah, like we have guides for a lot of the games that like the Tellius games and Three Houses especially also have guides, more in-depth guides. Awakening does too. I'm working on the Fates one. And yeah, like we're small, but we're around.
Mute, would you have any thoughts or should we move on?
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that the community is rather small. Maybe this will help with something of a resurgence. How would you advise that fans who are interested in getting involved as runners or routers would get more involved? So this could be, for example, you see many times that there's a speedrun Discord. I'll of course have a link to that below. This could also be finding places where you can find groups to draft race with, or even just things like runner mentality of being healthy about like running and improving.
I think what really sparked me into like sort of getting into Fire Emblem speedrunning was just like making friends in the community. Like I probably wouldn't have been speedrunning as much as I would have if it wasn't for like making a few friends and then just like streaming, talking to chat, like talking with other people that were also speedrunning. Like it definitely got the ball rolling. And I'm sure there's definitely a lot of people out there still that do have an interest in Fire Emblem speedrunning and like are around and do.
I was gonna say, like, I've kind of lost count of the number of times I see Wronghouse in like Raisin's chat or something, and I talk about something speedrun related, and Wronghouse is like, "Oh yeah, I've done that before," and I'm like, Wronghouse is probably a speedrun like every game, just never submitted or recorded anything, but like, it's really funny when that happens. But I did say they were small, but like we're also generally pretty friendly and pretty chill, and there is some overlap between like us and also like some other communities. Like
there's so many cool people that I've met over the years. Like there's always someone out there. Like I'd say probably just like pop into streams, say hello, check out the Discord and I guess follow some people that have been streaming for a while too.
Well, Mute, would you have any thoughts?
My advice would just be do whatever game you want. Like at this point, we have actually have routes for every single game in the series, I think. So there's available notes for everything. So no matter what game you want to do, you could do that, including both of the Tearing Saga games. Because me.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
the Vestaria Saga. Do people run that?
There are Japanese runners for that, but nobody has done it in English, so we don't have that, I guess. I would say like, well, is this like giving advice about running in general, I guess? Would that be applicable?
Yeah, sort of, if someone was looking to get involved as a speedrunner or with routing certain games, where would you advise they go? What would you advise they try and do?
In terms of actually doing runs, I would say don't really worry about like being good originally on, and you don't have to care about leaderboards either. Like if you just want to run for fun, that's completely fine too. And also like don't be too sad about making mistakes, because like you're obviously not going to be amazing at first early on too, because I still make mistakes sometimes, so that's just always going to happen pretty much.
Yeah, I think the most important part is just being familiar with the route and like the cursoring and menuing definitely comes afterwards. Because like fast menuing doesn't really do anything if you mess up the route, or like you're just like unfamiliar, second guessing. Like that comes with practice and just being comfortable, I guess.
You don't even have to like practice the speedrun itself. Like, I mean, you just knowing where all the menus are just comes down to playing the game a lot. Period.
Yeah, I've had friends that like had no experience in like speedrunning Fire Emblem, but they just followed the speedrun route, and they said that they like had a lot of fun, and they were like, "Wow, I'm like this far into the game, and I'm like 3 hours into my playthrough, and like I'm almost done the game." Just like.
If I could sort of bring more attention to what Mute said, because it really kind of resonated with me. The idea of not obsessing over leaderboards and time, I think that's really important for a lot of things. Like, of course, I have experience with doing low turn count runs. Like I did a low turn count Ironman of Thracia, which was an enormous project. But of course, I didn't start with that. I first learned the route. I just did a really casual triple S playthrough where I honestly mostly copied Dun strats, and that's kind of how I learned it. And then I became more comfortable that I could, sort of start doing my own thing and making my own contributions. So I definitely agree with what Mute said there. And I think that's really important that you just try to, have fun and focus on your personal best, not a world record first.
And that kind of goes for hardware stuff too. Like a lot of people, like it's understandable that like the first time you see a speedrun is like you go to speedrun.com, see a leaderboard, you watch runs, and you're like, oh, I want to learn a speedrun, I want to get on time on there. But I don't have the hardware to do all that. And what I usually tell a lot of people is to not worry about that, because like one, like your time's gonna suck at first, and that's fine. Like everyone starts somewhere. And two, like it's best to just try something out that's easier on emulator, for example, even if it's technically not allowed in some cases, because like after you try it out, if you end up not enjoying it, then like congratulations, you just saved yourself on a lot of money that you don't need to get hardware and stuff like that or controllers for and stuff. Point being, like, just try. Speedrunning is, leaderboards are competition is nice, but the most important thing is really just enjoying yourself and what you can do and improving yourself from there. And the leaderboards can come after that if it matters.
Yeah, so go have some fun on an emulator, unless it's VBA, I understand. Then you download MGBA. Is it MGBA you use?
MGBA is standard with BizHawk with MGBA Core is the standard for a lot of Game Boy Advance games. I haven't really tested that in the GBA Fire Emblems much. I should get around to that, but effort.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, anyway, if we're all done, then that's all the questions I have. So I really hope that this is a helpful, useful resource for anybody who's looking to get more out of watching speedruns or get into speedrunning themselves. Thanks all of you for joining. This was lots of fun.
Yeah, thank you, Lolo.
Yeah.
And maybe drop a quick shout out to Mekkah on his pitfalls video on speedrun, because that is also a fantastic video on just helping distinguish speedruns from LTCs as well.
I'll have to
Yeah,
ask people these things.
He also made a video about Three Houses speedrunning when the game came out about that time. That was probably helpful to that too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, Engage is coming out next week as well, so like that's gonna be fun. Routing and like fresh new.
I'm not gonna think about speedrunning it for until I'm
not gonna bother
for the month,
until
yeah.
I've played myself.
Yeah, we actually I asked Burton the series mod to like pretty much not make any categories or leaderboards for that game, just so people have a chance to enjoy the game for like the first 3 or 4 weeks instead of feeling rushed into a speedrun. Not that like people can't speedrun it.
I feel like there are gonna be people like doing runs after
Which
the
is
first
fine.
week or so.
Yeah,
Which is cool because like
obviously
people are
fine.
gonna enjoy the game that they want to
Mhm.
and like how they want to. But like I'm kind of looking forward to it. Like
Yeah, I am
that
too.
collaborative effort. Like I'm kind of considering it.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to enjoy the game first.
Yeah, for sure.
I've never
Yeah,
been involved.
cool. Sorry.
So I've never been involved in routing a new game, so that sounds interesting. Sorry.
Right? Yeah, I remember helping with
Always
some of the
exciting.
Three Houses stuff, like the Azure Moon bridge chapter.
Ooh,
Like
that one.
silly defeat bosses chapter. Like, I was helping. I don't remember their name. I was in their stream chat, just like, hey,
Sunny?
what if you're doing this? I think so. Yeah.
Probably Sunny. He's a cool guy. Also runs a bunch of
Collaborative community
RPG games.
effort.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots of people. Lots of cool people.
Well, it sounds like you guys have some work ahead of you within Engage. So yeah, I hope you guys have fun with that. I definitely learned a lot. Of course, I hope that anybody watching also learned something from this. Thanks all for watching. All right, goodbye.
See ya.
All right.
Later.
Thanks for having us.